since I talked the Raid this week, I'm now going to talk Dredd. I'm going to talk two Dredds. You know, the Dredd that was called Dreadful, and the Dredd that everyone loved. So, A Tale of Two Dredds. You know, now I should say I did read some Judge Dredd when I was younger. Not tons of it, but enough to know the character a little bit. You know, I couldn't tell you everything about Dredd, but I've read enough stories that I kind of have a rough idea what Dredd is, but not the most amazing knowledge of Dredd. It's not like I'm an expert on Dredd in any way. Just, I know something. So, Dredd, the first film, Judge Dredd, was a disaster. It was an utter mess. Then the second one came out. Then the Carl Urban reboot came out, which was written by Alex Garland, and some said half directed by Alex Garland. Pete Travis is known as director, but everyone said basically Alex Garland had a lot to do with this film. And it's one of those films that you really wish there was a sequel to it, because it seemed to build so much that you feel there was a lot more space to go over a sequel. Kind of like the way the Raid did with Raid 2, because the Raid and Dredd had very similar plots, which I've already just talked about in Raid video, so I'm not going to bother trying to go through it again. But you feel that Dredd had that same potential to go further and do a sequel that was different from the first one and just have a different feel to it. But it never had a chance. It was just like a film that I think it was tainted a lot by the Stallone film. I think people weren't that interested because everyone had seen the Stallone film and no one liked it much. And this film was, why are you doing Dredd again? So it did that problem, and it was also, I think the way it was released in... It's never quite got the original impact. They never quite thought the marketing plan behind it. So it was one of those films that people discovered later. It's a film that everyone's seen on video. I never saw it in the cinema. It seemed to come in the cinema and go again really quick. Like, that was the thing. The marketing was so weird. It was just, I think it was there and gone. So by the time you'd heard about it, it was gone. Which probably didn't help its prospects. But it's one of those films you felt like if it made a sequel, it would have been like Austin Powers or something, where the first film did fine, but everyone had a chance to see it, and so the second film would have done a lot better because people were more ready for it at that point. It got over the hump of the Stallone film and actually was ready to impress, but it was not to be. So let's talk about the Stallone film. Stallone film was... I've watched both of these films, both of them projected, so I actually could get a good grasp of the cinematic potential. As I saw the Judge Dredd in the cinema when it came out, it was released in 1985, opposite Die Hard 3, Batman Forever, Waterworld, things like that, Congo. So it was released then. Honestly, when I saw it in the cinema, I kind of enjoyed it, even though it wasn't very good. You could tell there's lots of problems. You could tell it had been cut to hell. Like, it wasn't the original view of the director. You could tell just by watching it that stuff had been cut out. And it had lots of problems. But I should admit, I preferred this one to Batman Forever. And I probably still do, because Batman Forever had the same futuristic world, but it was much more of a mess. And the annoying thing about Batman Forever was Tommy Lee Jones in that would have been a much better Judge Dredd than Stallone. He just had that look to him. He could have been a really good Dredd if they'd done Dredd properly. The problem with the film is they didn't do Dredd properly. They were scared of Dredd in a Dredd film. Now, that film came out much earlier than that. RoboCop took its thunder away because RoboCop was basically Judge Dredd as it should have been done. Which means it was a bit a law enforcement person who was pretty much by the book, who had to deal with... It was a satire on corporate greed. So it's part like, exploitation movie, part satire, and it was utterly brutal with politics and the greed of people, and that's so much Judge Dredd. Like, Judge Dredd is a very British creation about what happens when you get a society that breaks down into fascism, where the people are viewed as problems to be shot or incarcerated rather than actually dealt with. It's a very right-wing future, written by lefties who hate that future, but will can have a lot of fun with it and really poke fun at all the ideas of the right wing. which is the attraction of Dredd. It's a fascist hero by liberals. That's what RoboCop is. RoboCop's like a fascist hero by liberals with a tiny piss. So that film came out, and I think it was the thing that got Dredd interested. People's interested in doing Dredd because RoboCop really worked, even though the sequels didn't. It was like, oh, there's a taste here for that kind of film, and you've got Terminator come out, which is this other cyberpunk film. You know, Total Recall did well. So they eventually wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to play Dredd, which makes sense. Because he's probably a much better Dredd than Stallone was. He just has the build and look of Dredd more. He's probably much more deadpan. But he probably wouldn't have been right for Dredd either. Because you would have backed away from the fascist elements. That's why you need somebody like Tom Lee Jones in there who would have been... who doesn't seem to care about being disliked. And that's what was good about the reboot, which we'll get to. The problem with Dredd, the Stallone Dredd, really was they weren't comfortable with doing a mega budget film which required all these special effects and then be satirical. Because RoboCop was not a massive budget film. It was a decent budget film for Ryan who made it to take a chance on it, but it was not going to destroy a studio or cause any problems if it failed. It was a risk, but it was a risk that was limited. Dredd, on the other hand, was a risk where they spent too much money on the actual film and development wise, and then they spent all this money on a film to have all the special effects, and they felt they needed a big star to sell it. They probably did, because Dredd needed to be shot like RoboCop. Dredd did not need all the mega budget stuff that you get in a Batman film. It did not need all these matte effects. You needed to have cut the budget down and stick to the character was, and then you could build the rest up in sequels. But they actually just focused on all the toys, and because they thought you could sell toys and you could sell all this other stuff. But you're doing something about fascist regime, and you can't really sell toys with that. You know, I mean, Batman's kind of fascist as well, but Batman's got this crime fighter thing that goes against it enough so people buy toys. He's more of a hero. Dredd's in your face fascist. Dredd is like, yeah, these people do this are fascists. It's might. It's right by might. Basically, that's up front. And that's the thing the film cannot deal with. So what the film does well, I should say what it does well, right, is the world. Everything that actually destroys the story, it does well, which is the world of Mega City 1 looks great. They've got all these model works with CGI, so CGI is mixed with model work, so it doesn't look like crazy. It's a mix of both. Some CGI is aged badly, but you can see the intent and you can see the old-fashioned techniques mixed with model work. It still looks interestingly designed. It's a beautiful setup. All the sets are gorgeous. The Halls of Justice all look great. They're all kind of nicely fascist in the way they have a kind of Lenny Reverend style feel to them, but not too obvious. You know, it's just the right amount if you're going to play a satire straight and then tweak at it the way like Kubrick did with Dr. Strangelove. He's even quietly fascist, but not. Then you see these being bumbling within Dr. Strangelove. Here it's like they've got all the imagery right, but they haven't got the script right at all. And also further on, you also get like you go to the cursed earth, and you get like all that looks great. I mean, it looks amazing. You've got Scott Wilson as Pie Angel. You're Ian Bremner as his son. You've got the Luckhead there, who's just brutal. That's the best bit of the films actually when they go into cursed earth because it's more fun, and it's just more enjoyable because it's a bit more knockabout. Even though they kill the Angel Gang off way too quick. I mean, it's like it's sort of a skirmish and escape rather than they kill them. I mean, it just feels like it's vanity of violence rather than actually creating some tension by having Dredd having to escape rather than having to kill everybody. It just felt like it was just too gone crazy. So they work and all of the world works. Of course, some of the design for Stallone as Dredd is overdone because it's done by Versace, and it's overdone. It's like, yeah, it's too cartoonish. You've done too far. But the background stuff's all kind of cool in a very kind of comic booky way, because they're trying to be comic booky in some points and then try to be more realistic in other points, and they haven't quite worked out what they are. It's like 2 or 3 different people have different views of what the film should be, and you're getting bits and bobs of it. Like, the best acting in it is by Armin Asante, who's chewing the scenery. I mean, he is not trying to be subtle at all, but he's so much fun. You know, he's like, he kills people and says, he kills politicians and says, who said politics is boring. And anytime he has a scene with Stallone or anybody, he chews the scenery and he starts yelling, and it's like, there's no subtlety at all. And he's almost moustache twirling. But he's so much fun. He's so really enjoyable. It's like, anytime he shows up, it's good fun, because you know you're going to have an enjoyable scene, because he knows the film he's seen in his head is much better than the film you've seen. Like, straight away, the film is playing in his head is much better than the film we got. You know. And it's really enjoyable. That was a character I enjoyed in the cinema, and I've not seen this film for years. I don't have seen it since the early 2000s, really. So it's quite interesting to watch again on the Blu-ray and see it properly restored and things. And it looked really good. It was directed by Danny Cannon. This was his second film, and he was way too young to do this film. We needed a director who knew what the film was and who would argue with everybody. You needed someone like Verhoeven who could find a script and defend it. You never got that here. Like, at all. So, I mean, that's one of the big things is the script. I mean, the script is terrified of what the material is. It's got that annoying feel of a film that has been made by people who don't understand what they're doing. I mean, the weird thing is Stallone just come off of Demolition Man. You know, he was on a kind of a decent enough role at the time. I mean, he did the Cliffhanger, he did Demolition Man. Both good films. And this was when he started to go down again. Because, I mean, Demolition Man was a film that was a very basic setup of a very boneheaded story. And then they brought in Daniel Waters to rewrite it. And he created all this satire about political correctness and polite fascism, really. Like, you get fined for swearing and you're fined for having bad opinions. Very much like now, where we don't say anything too controversial, it's too scary. But that's going on in the 90s as well. It was a piss take of that. But the good thing with that film was they used Stallone and what he could do. They used Wesley Snipes as the bulls in a china shop. And everyone else handled the satire. And it was just Stallone actually acting as the character in a kind of a normal way. So he was a straight man for the craziness. And it really worked. Because it made Stallone look good. Because he got the joke, but he could play along with it. But he wasn't the person having to be funny. He's been funny in reaction to crazy by being understated. And that really worked. Demolition Man's still a blast. It's really fun. It's very clunky, but it's really enjoyable. This one, they're asking Stallone to be funny. Anyone who's seen Stallone films, ask him to be funny in character like Rocky. He can do it. Ask him to be a comedian. Doesn't work. He doesn't have that timing that you need for fast-paced comedy. He just doesn't have it. And this one, they asked him to be funny. And he looks uncomfortable trying to be the satirical Dredd. Because he overplays the satire. Because there's no real satire there. They're just saying, just play up the over-the-top fascist thing. But Dredd's a sincere character. He thinks he's right through the brutality. So instead of actually having Stallone be the straight man to the craziness and you inflict everything on him, which would have have a chance of working. But I just think Stallone was too miscast as a character. That might have worked. But he tells Stallone's much more comfortable when he's playing scenes against Asante, or when he's playing scenes where he's being betrayed by something and he can act hurt. He can be more Rocky-like. When he's been asked to be more satirical and more bombastic, he doesn't quite have the pacing for it. He just looks hot most of the time. And it's almost like he can't quite work out that he was the villain. I mean, the joke about Judge Dredd is he's the villain, but he's also a hero. Stallone doesn't get that. Stallone doesn't kind of do the villain bit. And because of that, the hero bit suffers too. Because they're trying to make him a normal hero, and it doesn't work because he's a fascist. And the setup shows he's a fascist. So it's very confused about what he actually is. So they just say, just do what you can do. Because they don't know who the character is. And they have lots of speeches talking about democracy and all this other stuff. And it's like the kind of Romans talking in the Sandal epics of the 50s, where people have read books and they're quoting from books, but they don't quite know the meaning of what they're doing, so the scenes go on. So there are a lot of scenes that are disconnected from each other, that are banging off each other in weird ways, and it's like, what am I watching? That's especially difficult when you're watching this film, you're not watching a projector on a big screen, where on the big screen the actual imagery keeps you going, like the big ABC robot that's killing people, you get the city in the background, all this great design. It keeps you going, and it's just this new another page of great imagery. On the small screen, that imagery looks really, really CGI'd and compressed, and doesn't really look that great. And you've got all these people to yap at each other, and you've got things set up that don't pay off, and you've got other stuff that's set up as that's a major problem, and it's abandoned by the end of the film. There's a whole thing about them trying to turn someone who's a very fascist into something even more fascist to, because they are the judges and they're getting overrun, they want to create these clone soldiers. They even say send in the clones at some point, who are more fascist. Which seems weird, but that's the plot. But they don't play up the satire of that, like, at all. It's a serious plot. And then you see all these judges getting killed, and the judges are meant to be the best, the soldiers, and they get knocked off like they're extras. Which makes them look really bad. It's like, how do they keep control ever anyway? Because they get knocked off by a couple of lunatics trying to take them out, and it's like, well, that's not impressive. It just makes them look stupid. And then at the end of the film, Dredd's been proven not to be the villain anymore. He's saved society, apparently, even though they've lost, like, hundreds of men. How are they going to keep the peace in the city that's way out of control? And they just abandon that and they don't ever talk about it. And it's like, that was the point of the film, and you've abandoned it. It does feel like a biblical epic where it's like, we've got these ideas, but we don't want to think about them too much. I mean, you've got some good actors getting trashy parts in this. I mean, other actors show up. Diane Lane's in it, and she's Judge Hershey. She's nothing to do. Just look emotional every so often. That's what she's asked to do. And she has to defend Dredd at some point when he's been in trial. And she gets a lot of garbage to say, and it's like, no actor can survive this. This makes no sense. And Max von Sydow is Dredd's mentor, who turns out to be his father, because Dredd and Rico are clones of him. And you've all these clones who look different. Aren't they meant to look the same? If you're cloned, if the same DNA, you're going to look the same. Well, that's what I assume clones work. I mean, if you have the exact same DNA strand, you should look exactly like the person you cloned. So they say, oh no, it's a clone, but they've changed it around a little bit. But then Stallone and Asante played two different characters. So were there two variations of many variations, or what? Let me explain that. The whole cloning thing is, we've got clones. And it feels like 2 minutes would have told you what the problem was. There's also something else a bit where it's been very been parodied a lot. It's like when the judges fire a gun, the DNA sample put in the bullet, which would take a long time if you try to shoot somebody. One. And two, the judges wear gloves. It's like, how do you get through that? And how do the judges not know that happens as well? It seems weird. There's all sorts of stuff like that are like, God, this is overly complicated. The whole film's overly complicated. And Von Sydow, he's had fun with comic characters before, like Ming the Merciless and the King in Conan. He looks out here because there's a scene at the end where he dies, or it happens midway through, and he just goes, no. And it's like almost like he's just giving up. He's like, nah, fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore. Just let me die. I've had enough of this film. I just want to get out of here. He's trying his best, but his character is set in this fascist world, and then he's meant to be a dignified old man, And they don't really bring us together at all, and they give Cyril nothing to do. And that's the whole film. They never work at the implications of what the problem is. So these sentimental characters who should be much more cynical and corrupt and should be part of the satire. And the satire should be how clueless they are about their own flaws. But it's not there. But they're trying to say it's a satire, even though it's not a satire or anything. It's like a defense of fascism, ultimately. Because the lead guys are fascists, and you defend them, and you do say they meant well. It's a fascist film, basically. It's totally a fascist film. But it's not what you should be doing with Dredd. Dredd should not be a fascist film. I mean, it's basically saying, look at this guy. This guy's crazy, which is the Rico character. So just follow our way. And it's like, oh, actually, it's probably more nuances than that one. So it's genuine. It's sort of like Minority Report, another Von Sydow starring film, which also is a film which fascist undertones that they don't like to address. So that's the Stallone version of Dredd, or the Danny Cannon version, or the compromise, whoever edited it by the end of the film version, because it looked like it was cut to hell. Okay, now we go to the Carl Urban, Alex Garland one that is so much better. First of all, this film knows your lead character's a fascist. That's a joke. He knows, they know, and they're not trying to defend him. They're just saying this is the world. It's a world with high crime. There's too many people in a small situation. There's lots of criminals who are brutalising the population, who do not care. There's lots of drug abuse. Dredd's the imperfect guy to try and stop this from getting out of control, and that's it. But they all know he's a problem, that they don't want to think of it too much. So you see him, like, he follows the law to the extreme. But they never go to satire, obvious satire, because they know it's a first film, and they know the plot can't support that at the moment. What they have to do is show a day in the life of Dredd, which is, he goes to the Peachtree's estate. He has to bring in a rookie, Judge Anderson, played by Olivia Tripoli, and they go through hell as they're stuck in his building. They found a perp of a murder. He knows stuff that Anderson as a psychic can get into, and the psychics at the judge station will get into. So if he leaves the building, they'll know all the secrets. So they have to get him out of the building while the building's locked down and everyone's trying to kill them. That's it. And then you find out Dredd's character as he goes through that problem. I mean, if you see Dredd a little bit earlier on as he takes down some perps on a bike, then into another different mega city building, and you see he sticks by the letter of the law. He does not care about killing people because he thinks they're perps. If they betrayed the law, they die. But it's a much more Lee Marvin version of it. He is very much Dredd. It's like, I don't care what you think of me. So we're setting up Dredd as who he is, and you should have problems with him. It's like, it's one of the things where if you don't have problems with Dredd, you're the problem. You know, again, it's one of those ones. It's like RoboCop. It's liberals doing a fascist character, and you get the subtle things of what the problem with Dredd is as you go through. You see with Judge Anderson, who's a much more human character. She's a psychic. She's more humane, but she's not going to take any crap from the criminals either. So you get both of them facing off each other. They're not even speeches to each other. It's just like little reactions as you see each other's attitude. And you see that Dredd is a bit stiff, is no nonsense. He does believe in the law. He is a true believer. So that's what you get from Dredd. And you also see that he sticks to the law, but if you can prove to him that something's not right, or his initial assessment may be wrong, he can listen. He's capable of listening. So he's not a total bastard, but he's close. So you get to enjoy the character and have fun with the character, but also know what he is and why that situation's bad. And he's a product of a system that's going really wrong. And you basically, it's like it was shot in South Africa, and it's all these big, You see this city that just looks destroyed. It looks like there's been wars. People are now trapped in this city, and they're trying to survive. And nothing looks good. Everything's like a third world country. He's part of a basically fascist government, and he will take anyone down. And that's it. And that was a building block for more films, which probably would have done more satire as it went on. But it knows what mistake not to do with Dredd, which is try and sentimentalize him. You keep his helmet on, so he is almost the state of the fascist world. You show him to be tough, unbending, and it's like, what do you think? What's your opinion of this? Because he just shows you why he's like that. He's dealing with these criminals all the time who try to kill him. And that's what creates Dredd. High crime. That's what creates them. That's what creates those kind of fascists a lot of the time, is this sense of a society that's gone away from them. You don't need speeches for that. You just need a person in a situation who are doing this every day, day after day after day. Which is why a lot of cops tend to go towards right rather than left, because they just see the worst in people. And that's just life. And that's what's so good about the film, is that's just life. And then they put him in an extreme situation, and you watch him get through it. And it's glorious, because when Carl Urban says, "I am the law," which is the famous Judge Dredd line, he nails it. And Stallone does it in the first minute of Judge Dredd film, is "I am the law." With Urban, they'll leave it till halfway through, after a lot of stuff's going wrong, and then he uses "I am the law" as he gets a hold of the transmitter through the building, and he says, the villain's called Mama, who's played by Lena Headey, and he says, "She's not the law, I am the law." And he says it's so deadpan, it's perfect. It's like, that's the perfect way to say that. And he just nails it. And that's what's so good about his portrayal. It's so low key, but every moment counts. Everything's been worked out. He doesn't need to overdo anything. He doesn't need to overdo any satire. You don't ask you to like him. You don't ask him for anything. You just step away. And every line's perfect. He's just so good. I've been so good as Dredd that you wish there was much more of him, because he just feels like he's perfect in the part. And Tripley's great as Judge Anderson as well, because she starts out, she's about to flunk out, and this is an assessment, the day of assessment, and you see her go through hell and start to grow some backbone and see why Dredd acts that way, but it never asks you to actually agree with them. It's like, this is their reaction to this. That's it. That's what creates a cop in this environment. A reaction to this thing. But it never actually agree with them. It's just like, this is these two characters in this situation. Which works so much better for Dredd. But beyond that, what you actually get with Dredd is the world, the sense of the world. I mean, the comic book's much more cartoonish. You go into stuff like Judge Death, and it's much brighter, and you get these satirical names of different blocks. You've got all these crazy characters, and it shows you how crazy the world's got, and it shows you why Dredd's the way he is. He's dealing with it. He's almost a straight man through this crazy world. You don't get that as much here, but you get enough. You get to know that there's some strange characters here. It's done much more naturalistic, but it's set up so that if it went stranger later on, it's perfect for what you need. It's like, this is a realistic day-to-day cop drama. If you go against Judge Death or something, you'd get something bigger, but you don't need all of that. It's like, there's enough craziness there just by people trying to survive, just by the survival techniques people use. I mean, Mama, the villain, she's not overdone, but she makes sense, but she's still pretty crazy. There's a slow-mo drug that it makes people feel time goes much slower and creates these weird hallucinations. Which, actually, if you lived in that world, you'd want that drug. Really, it's like, it feels almost like brutal for the cops to try to stop that, because it's like, if you're in that situation, you'd really want that, wouldn't you? So it plays that as well. It's like, it gives you a drug that a lot of people would actually want, in that hellhole to try and survive it. And it puts you in the thing outside of the people who are trying to stop it, and it's kind of funny that way because it really is something that people are going through a living hell, and it's this just feels like a drug that feels kind of mild hallucinogenic. It doesn't feel like it's an extreme drug. They don't ever present it as much beyond it will rot your teeth a little bit. That's it. But so that creates a kind of satire as well. Is like the idea of like the thing they're trying to take down is doesn't seem that bad. It's the way the criminals deal with it to try and keep onto the patch is what actually causes the problem. But also, it's a fascist society, so anyone who goes away from the norm will get tramped on, and any kind of drugs you're going to get you're going to get thrown in jail. So it shows you like it is a society of extremes, and you really should not be on the side of either the criminals or Dredd. It's like you're kind of in the middle of these two psychos going at each other. A more normal look at the problem would be somewhere in the middle without the criminal and the shooting and stuff like that. So that's what it does well. It really does deliver on what the issues are and what's the complexity of the situation. So that's what's really good about the film. It really just does deliver on the stuff here that you can chew on a little bit. We're not going to force it on you, but you watch it again, you'll see there's lots of issues here that no one's dealing with. There's like lots of people who are abandoned, lots of people who have been left to go crazy. There's a suggestion of a world that's much more mutated if you went into it. There's a lot of mutants who look crazy, but you never see them in this film, but they're mentioned. So there's lots of things there. You mention a sense of the world is just about to go completely off its rocker. And Dredd's determined to keep hold of that world. So you get a sense of that if you went in a sequel, there would be something bigger and broader available to them, which they never got to because this film didn't do as well as it should have. But it is a wonderful film. It is a great genre film. It's loyal to Dredd, but also loyal to the idea that you're not meant to be on the side. It's like you have to decide on your own what you think of this. It doesn't do any pro-Dredd things. It doesn't do any anti-Dredd things. It just treats him like who he is. Treats Anderson like who she is and just says, make your own mind up. That's your own problem. So I hope you enjoyed this look at Judge Dredd. 2 films, one good, one not so good. So, I'll see you later. Bye for now.